A new threat from President Trump in the standoff over Greenland. The president says he'll impose a 10% tariff on Denmark and 7 other European nations opposed to his takeover plans. Today, thousands rallied in Denmark and Greenland, as you see there, to send Trump a message that the territory is not for sale.
Donald Trump just launched economic attack on America's closest allies that could trigger global trade war and destroy decades of international cooperation. And I mean that with every ounce of seriousness I have, because what Trump announced isn't targeted pressure on one country, isn't limited dispute over trade policy. This is sweeping tariffs on 8 major European democracies simultaneously, all because they won't support his delusional plan to buy Greenland. Denmark getting hit, Norway getting hit, Sweden, France, Germany, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Finland, all facing 10% tariffs starting next month, rising to 25% by summer. Every single product they export to America, cars, machinery, wine, pharmaceuticals, everything, taxed into oblivion until these countries agree to what Trump calls complete and total purchase of Greenland, territory that isn't for sale, population that doesn't want to be American, allies being punished for defending their own sovereignty, and Trump saying this is literally life or death for America, that world peace is at stake, that tariffs will continue indefinitely until he gets what he wants. This is madness. This is president threatening entire world over invasion fantasy nobody supports. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown Show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what Trump actually announced, because scale of this is absolutely staggering. 8 countries targeted, not just Denmark, which administers Greenland. 7 other nations whose only connection is being NATO allies who support Denmark's right to keep its own territory. Think about how insane that is. Norway didn't do anything except say Denmark should keep Greenland. Finland didn't interfere except to stand with ally. France and Germany simply stated obvious fact that you can't force sovereign nation to sell its territory. And for that, they all get punished with massive tariffs. And these aren't targeted tariffs on specific products. This is comprehensive economic warfare. All goods language means everything. German cars become 10% more expensive overnight. French wine, British pharmaceuticals, Dutch electronics, Scandinavian furniture, industrial components, agricultural products, luxury goods. Everything these countries export to United States gets hit. Then in June, tariffs double to 25%, making trade relationships completely unsustainable. Think about what that does to global economy. United States and Europe together represent roughly 40% of world GDP. Trade between them worth hundreds of billions annually. Supply chains crossing Atlantic. Companies depending on transatlantic commerce. And Trump threatening to blow all that up over Greenland. Over territory he has no right to. Over population that overwhelmingly rejects becoming American. Only 6% of Greenlanders want to join United States. 6%. But Trump demanding complete and total purchase anyway. And here's what makes this even more deranged. Trump's national security justification is complete fraud. He claims America needs Greenland for security, that it's life or death issue. But United States already has military presence in Greenland. Thule Air Base, operating since 1950s. Early warning radar systems. Defense agreements with Denmark that give America everything needed strategically. Security cooperation already works. Don't need to own territory to maintain Arctic presence. So what's real reason for this obsession? Some combination of ego, territorial fantasy, desire to look strong, belief that adding Greenland to map makes him look like great conqueror. None of which are legitimate governmental interests. None of which justify economic warfare against allies. None of which excuse threatening countries that have stood with America for decades through actual crises. Share this with everyone, because European leaders aren't accepting this quietly. France and Germany calling tariffs unacceptable and economic blackmail. That's language normally reserved for hostile powers, not for allies. When your closest democratic partners use term blackmail to describe your actions, relationship has fundamentally broken. Trust has been destroyed. Alliance is in crisis, and European Union convening emergency talks on retaliation, not discussing how to compromise with Trump's demands, discussing how to hit back, preparing counter tariffs on American goods, bourbon, motorcycles, agricultural products, tech services, exploring World Trade Organization challenges to Trump's tariffs as violations of international rules, building coordinated response that escalates economic conflict rather than resolving it. Think about implications for NATO. Alliance depends on trust, on belief that members will defend each other, that disputes get resolved diplomatically, that allies don't use coercive power against each other. Trump threatening economic warfare over Greenland shatters all that. How can European countries trust American defense commitments when America treats them as adversaries over territorial demands? How can alliance function when leader of alliance acts like authoritarian bully? Make sure you're subscribed because critics are comparing Trump's approach to how Russia behaves. Russia uses economic leverage to bully neighbors. Russia threatens military force to change borders. Russia treats smaller countries' sovereignty as negotiable. And Trump now doing exact same thing toward America's own allies, using American economic power coercively, demanding territorial changes, treating sovereignty of democratic nations as something he can purchase or seize. And this fits pattern of Trump's entire second term. Venezuela president seized without congressional authorization. Minneapolis facing deployment of federal forces and army troops against peaceful protesters. Now European allies facing economic punishment for defending their own territory. Pattern is using American power coercively regardless of law, constitution, or alliance obligations. Pattern is strongman governance that recognizes no constraints. Share this video with everyone you know because even Republicans are breaking with Trump on this. Senior senators calling Greenland plan weapons grade stupid. That's not Democrats criticizing. That's Trump's own party saying this is insane. McConnell expressing concerns. Other GOP senators publicly opposing approach. Bipartisan recognition that threatening allies over territorial fantasy damages American interests fundamentally. Canada standing with Europe too. Prime Minister announcing support for Danish sovereignty over Greenland. Opening consulate in Greenland's capital as statement of solidarity. America's closest neighbor, country sharing massive border and deep economic ties, saying no, we don't support this invasion talk. That's how isolated Trump is. Can't even get Canada on board with Greenland obsession. Think about what Trump's actually saying when he rants about Europe being subsidized. He sees alliances as transactions where America gets cheated, ignores everything allies provide, military bases hosting American troops, intelligence cooperation that prevents attacks, diplomatic support on global stage, market access for American companies, shared research and development, mutual benefits that make both sides stronger. But Trump frames it as America being ripped off, as Europe owing debt that Greenland demands somehow collects. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because world peace is at stake. Claim inverts reality completely. If peace is threatened, it's because Trump threatening it, not Denmark. Denmark isn't launching invasion. Denmark isn't imposing economic warfare. Denmark isn't threatening military force. Trump doing all of that. Trump saying he won't rule out military action. Trump imposing tariffs as coercion. Trump creating crisis where none existed. And life or death framing is pure propaganda. There's no life or death situation requiring Greenland ownership. No emergency that justifies destroying alliances. No threat that American military presence through existing agreements can't handle. Hyperbolic language designed to make extreme measures seem necessary. To convince people who don't examine situation that Trump has legitimate reason for actions that are actually completely unjustifiable. Timeline Trump set creates artificial urgency. 10% tariffs February 1st, rising to 25% June 1st, continuing indefinitely until capitulation. No off-ramp except surrender. No compromise offered. No face-saving outcome available. Just escalating economic pain designed to break resistance, to force democratic allies to give up sovereign territory because American president demands it. Think about what that means for American consumers and businesses. European goods becoming more expensive, Everything from cars to wine to pharmaceuticals, prices rising for Americans buying these products. And when Europe retaliates with their own tariffs, American exporters lose access to massive markets. Farmers can't sell agricultural products. Manufacturers can't sell machinery. Tech companies face barriers. Trade war Trump launching hurts Americans he claims to help. And broader global economy suffers too. Uncertainty about transatlantic trade disrupts investment. Companies delay expansion plans. Supply chains get reorganized at enormous cost. Economic growth slows. Jobs get lost. All because Trump wants Greenland and thinks economic warfare will get it for him. Willing to damage prosperity of millions to pursue territorial fantasy that serves no legitimate purpose. Make sure you're subscribed, because here's what European retaliation looks like. Targeted tariffs on products from red states and swing districts, bourbon from Kentucky, motorcycles from Wisconsin, agricultural goods from farm states, strategic political targeting designed to create pressure on Trump from his own supporters. Europeans have done this before. They know how to make tariffs hurt politically for American president who imposed them. And World Trade Organization challenges could rule Trump's tariffs illegal. International trade rules prohibit using tariffs for non-economic purposes. Can't weaponize trade policy to force territorial changes. That's exactly what Trump doing. WTO panels could authorize European countries to impose unlimited retaliatory tariffs, could give them legal permission to escalate far beyond anything Trump imagines, opening economic warfare that spirals out of control. Thousands rallying in Denmark and Greenland sending message territory is not for sale. Greenlanders making clear they don't want to be American, don't want Trump ruling them, don't want to abandon connection to Denmark. Public opposition is overwhelming, not close question. Massive majorities rejecting Trump's entire premise. But Trump doesn't care what Greenlanders want, treats them as property to be purchased. Complete and total purchase language reveals how he views this, not as people with rights and preferences, as assets to be acquired, as territory to add to his collection. That colonial mindset applied to autonomous population with its own government and identity. Think about message this sends to rest of world. If America's president can threaten allies over territorial demands, can use economic power to coerce democracies, can ignore sovereignty of nations that have done nothing wrong, who's safe? What small country can trust that America won't decide their territory should be American? What ally can believe American commitments when those commitments get abandoned over presidential whims? Russia and China watching this with absolute glee. They benefit enormously from NATO divisions, from transatlantic relations breaking down, from democratic allies turning on each other, Trump doing their strategic work for them, accomplishing what Russian and Chinese propaganda couldn't, actually damaging Western alliance from inside through his own actions. And this undermines American global leadership fundamentally. For decades, America led democratic world through alliance building, through institutions, through respect for sovereignty and international rules. Trump systematically destroying all of that, showing allies they can't trust America, showing adversaries that American president acts like authoritarian, showing entire world that democracy's leading power behaves like dictatorship when convenient. Share this with everyone, because complete and total purchase demand paired with indefinite tariffs reveals Trump's mindset. He thinks everything has price, that enough economic pressure forces compliance, that sovereign nations will eventually surrender if pain becomes great enough. That's not diplomacy. That's extortion. That's how criminal organizations operate, not how democratic governments should function. And European resistance suggests they won't capitulate. France and Germany aren't backing down, calling this blackmail, preparing retaliation, building coalition of opposition. They understand giving in to Trump's demands would establish precedent. That next time he wants something unreasonable, he'd use same tactics. That showing economic coercion works invites more of it. Think about what happens if Trump actually follows through with tariffs. February 1st deadline approaching. Either he backs down and looks weak to his base, or he imposes tariffs and triggers massive retaliation. Either outcome damages him. Backing down proves threats were empty. Following through creates economic disaster he owns politically. Make sure you're subscribed because Greenland population has spoken repeatedly. They don't want this. Their government opposes it. Denmark stands firm. European allies support Denmark. Canada supports Denmark. Even Republican senators oppose Trump's approach. He's completely isolated on this issue. 17% of Americans support buying Greenland. 83% oppose or don't care. 6% of Greenlanders want to join America. Nobody backing this except Trump and his most devoted followers. Yet he's willing to damage global economy, fracture NATO, alienate every major ally, risk trade war that hurts American consumers and businesses, all for territorial fantasy that serves no legitimate national interest. That reveals something fundamental about how Trump operates. He doesn't care about consequences, doesn't think through second-order effects, just demands what he wants and threatens destruction if he doesn't get it. This is Trump going psycho over invasion nobody wants, threatening entire world with economic warfare, 8 countries facing tariffs, hundreds of billions in trade at risk, alliance relationships fracturing, global economy threatened, all because President decided Greenland should be American despite overwhelming opposition from everyone, including people who actually live there. Bottom line is this: Trump announced sweeping tariffs on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, United Kingdom, Netherlands, and Finland, starting 10% February 1st, rising to 25% June 1st, continuing indefinitely until they agree to complete and total purchase of Greenland. Called tariffs literally life or death for America. Claimed world peace is at stake. Ranted about Europe being subsidized and owing America. European leaders calling it economic blackmail. Unacceptable. EU convening emergency talks on retaliation, preparing counter tariffs and WTO challenges. Republicans calling plan weapons grade stupid. Canada standing with Europe. Greenlanders overwhelmingly rejecting Trump's proposal. Only 6% want to join America. Only 17% of Americans support buying Greenland. But Trump threatening global trade war anyway, willing to fracture NATO, damage transatlantic commerce worth hundreds of billions, alienate closest democratic partners, risk economic catastrophe, all for territorial fantasy he has no right to pursue, all because he wants Greenland on map with his name attached to acquisition. This is madness. This is president using American power as weapon against friends. This is economic warfare over invasion that violates every principle of sovereignty and democratic cooperation, and consequences will be severe. For American consumers facing higher prices, for American businesses losing European markets, for alliances that depend on trust, Trump is destroying. For global economy disrupted by unnecessary trade war, European retaliation coming, economic damage mounting, alliance fractures deepening, all because Trump went psycho over Greenland and decided threatening entire world was appropriate response to being told no. This story continues developing. Stay tuned.